Greetings and welcome to the Captain's Table podcast. My name is Mike Gatto and I served 7 years in the California legislature representing a district that was centered in Los Angeles. And I'm going to be your guest host today. And this morning I have the absolute joy of interviewing a living legend, someone who many of you may know as Mayor Willie Brown. But to those of us familiar with how his legend was born, and that is of course in the California legislature, he will always be Speaker Willie Brown to us. Mr. Speaker, it's great to have you with us.
And it's good to be with you too, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. It's an absolute joy to have you here. And I should also say that, as former lawmakers, we know that rules are so important in life. And on this radio show, there's only one rule that we ask guests to follow, and that is to be authentic, to open up, to tell us something beyond the usual interview stuff that perhaps no one knows. And we like to think that we're no longer talking to the press to manipulate policy or manipulate the press. This is for the history books. Does that all sound good?
That sounds good to me.
Good. So I asked some of my friends what they wanted to ask, and I also put a question out on Twitter, and there were a lot of good suggestions. And that to me shows that you remain a very, very interesting figure. And I'm not sure how long we have, so I'll ask these questions in rapid fire, and I call them, this is what everyone wants to know about Willie Brown. So here's question one.
All right.
Okay, so my old district, which is the 43rd, was made up of parts of Mike Roo's old district, part of Pat Nolan's. And I've always thought that Mike Roos was perhaps the smoothest politician I've ever met. He was so good with people. He always says just the right thing. Now, some people out there say that the smoothest or most gifted politician is Gavin Newsom. Some say it's Bill Clinton. You've known thousands of politicians in your long life. Now, putting yourself aside, who is the most gifted politician that you've ever known?
Without a doubt, William Jefferson Clinton.
Wow. And is that just because he had that unbridled charisma, or what made him that way?
He has superior brain power. He has almost a high school person's interest in everything and in everybody. He has the ability to focus very quickly and to be succinct in all of his responses. And you find that he has actually lived a life of homework that evidences itself whenever you approach and hear him. And that was my conclusion before he became president. I met him in 1972.
Wow. Yeah, I've heard fascinating things about him. Like he would have index cards on different, influential elected officials in his life, and he would keep little notes on them. And before this was something that people did, and now it's all done on computer, of course. But so it's a mixture of charisma and homework. That's fascinating.
And that's who he is. Period.
Yeah.
And incidentally, Mike Roos is of the same ilk. And I suspect if Mike had really wanted to concentrate on life the way Bill Clinton did for the world of politics, Mike Roos would be rated somewhere near him.
Yeah, those are my thoughts too. And of course, it's on these shows we always have the decision to, do we go with a very local figure or somebody of national renown? And obviously, there might be some listeners who don't know who Mike Roos even is, but he's a terrific fellow. And so, former President Clinton is very, very charismatic and just obviously accomplished a lot. Okay, next question. So you served with what people in the media call Jerry Brown 1.0, and I served with Jerry Brown 2.0. In that when we were in the legislature, it was different times of when he was governor. Now, so this is two questions. How do you think he changed over the years? And more importantly, how do you think the history books will judge him?
Let's start with, I don't think Jerry Brown changed. And if he did, it was not much. Because Jerry Brown was a member of government from the 70s when he was Secretary of State. Then he 2 terms as the governor of the state of California. when he was being extraordinarily creative with only marginal success. Then he went on to become a radio talk show host from his own warehouse in Oakland, California, became the mayor of Oakland, California. Then he graduated from that to the attorney generalship of the state of California, and then 2 more terms as governor. As he made his various transitions, he became aware that the term limits had literally quelched the thirst and the opportunity for people to choose politics as a career. And he felt almost alone, and he was, in many cases, intolerant of lessers in the world of politics, so to speak. And he became Jerry Brown 2.0, but he was really only Jerry Brown 1.0 in a world in which there were no other measurements, and therefore 2.0 became natural.
Fascinating.
I think he will be remembered as a person who managed to take full advantage of the opportunities presented to him by the brand of Brown family over the last 50 or so years in California, and he has parlayed that into something that should have been done even in his first term.
Fascinating. That is a very interesting perspective because I sensed that when I interacted with him. He certainly was impatient with many members of the legislature. He, particularly the younger ones, the ones who had been, staffers of staffers, and they're now doing their turn in the musical chairs of term limits. And but I've never heard it put that way, and that's really fascinating.
Yes, and he's a very good friend of mine.
Yeah,
I was the only elected official that endorsed his candidacy for the Secretary of Stateship in the early 70s when he moved from the Los Angeles, I think, Community College Board into the job that cut all of us off from the good times we were having in Sacramento because he limited the amount of money that could be spent for entertainment by lobbyists. He then proceeded to be a creative in addressing the environmental issues and things of that nature without understanding the need for a politician with his stature and his standards and his ability to be consistently evidencing gratitude of participation with other people. He didn't do that. And he left in my first 2 years of speakership, 80 to 82. Jerry Brown was there, and he left the wholes of the legislature, only to return in the world of politics many years later, after he had been a candidate for the presidential nomination 2 or 3 times, without any success whatsoever. He went on to become a relator of Mother Teresa. He became a radio talk show host at his own facility in Oakland. And then he graduated to the job of mayorship.
Yeah, came back.
And he was just as indifferent to other elected officials in that capacity as he ultimately was to all the term limits persons with whom you serve.
That is right. That is right. Okay, question 3. So the assembly, the state assembly, was a very different place when you were first elected. There was no social media, no Twitter, no Facebook. There were no recorded votes in many committees. There were no cameras on the floor capturing your every move and, giving people an opportunity to grandstand when they gave a speech. I guess the first question is, do you think these are the changes are positive or negatives? And the second question is, do you think you could have accomplished so much as you did under the new paradigm and the new rules?
I think it would have been almost impossible for me to have been able to wield the true power of the speakership. The speakership power was virtually equal if orchestrated correctly by a person who had tenure, as I ultimately had tenure. I do not think that there would have been the kind of coverage on a positive basis as my speakership was so covered. I think that at the stage of the term limits application, the press people had ceased to be career press people in Sacramento. Yeah. Press coverage had changed dramatically. The reporters no longer were people who were as interested and as qualified and as participants. There was a clear absence of acquaintanceship with elected officials that came with all the new methods of communicating and with the term limit process being imposed. People stopped having full coverage from local places like San Francisco, in Alameda County, in San Jose, in the Inland Empire, and Orange County. It was all reflective of today's kind of hit and miss and today's kind of got you mentality. Yeah. And it was therefore not very good. Just think, when I was serving as Speaker, one of the great things we had that sealed ongoing respectful relationships between elected officials and the press was the Speaker's golf tournament.
Yes.
Which the press played in that golf tournament full time. I only cite that as just one example of how there was a camaraderie that was done by qualified people at every level and mutually respectful. There was no cutting of the corners by the press. There was no writing of stories just for fun. They were really informational opportunities, and they relied upon you, a member of the assembly, to be accurate in your supply of information. You were proud enough to be fully prepared. They knew that and understood it. The people in the private sector, as we call the third house, regularly met the same kind of standards. And so it was a dramatically different place. And it afforded someone who really had an interest, like I had in the speakership as a career, it afforded the person of that ilk to really be able to achieve things, whether it was freeing Nelson Mandela, whether it was Mike Roos carrying the bill to get the gun control laws and the assault weapon banned, or whether it was any of the other things that was done in both houses of the legislature without the fear of being misrepresented through the unedited social media process of today. So It was dramatically different, and I must tell you, far more productive.
Yeah, I've heard that too. And it doesn't shock me. And we'll be right back after this short break. And keeping in the theme of talking about folks from your tenure, Mr. Speaker, we recently lost Bruce Young, and he's the guy who I never knew in person, but I got to know him quite well on social media. Ironically, he started tweeting a lot before he passed, and he would have conversations with me on Twitter. And he seems like he was a great guy, and I know he had some problems in his tenure, but he seems like he became somewhat of an elder statesman in his later years. And one of our viewers asked us to ask you, what's your favorite Bruce Young story? Do you have any that are particularly funny or interesting Bruce Young stories?
Yeah, well, it really isn't the Bruce Young story directly at Bruce, but Bruce was always constantly getting married or engaged, or something of that nature. And on one occasion, Bruce was about to get married, and I said to a senator named Bob Beverly, Bob, are you going to the wedding of Bruce Young? And he said, I can't make this one, but I'll make the next one.
Oh, that is hilarious.
Bruce about it.
Wow.
Bruce was a great guy. He was very important to me because of his ability to help direct electing people to public office in the halls of the legislature, in my house, as I called it.
Yeah.
And it was important, and Bruce, therefore, was extremely helpful. We had what we called the support service that members used, and Bruce was intimately involved in the member service.
Yeah.
So it's no surprise to me that he, as you say, was tweeting in his later years. Bruce was tweeting before there were any tweeters.
That is really funny. If you could go back to the assembly for one more term, would you?
No.
No.
I would not want to spoil my history.
I understand. I understand that. Now, here's a tough question to ask, but it's one where we ask folks to remember what we said about being authentic. Now, my belief is that everyone regrets something in life. And there's a lot of people who are blessed and they say, oh, I don't regret anything. But I'm curious, what do you regret?
Not running for governor.
Got it. What year would you have run?
98.
And did you have the funds ready and everything like that?
Would not have needed them. I was virtually a household name.
Oh, you still are?
In the state of California.
You still are?
Because I had been in my speakership role. There was not a district, virtually, that I had not visited in one way or another, and for good reasons, Republicans and Democratic districts. I have been a participant in every form of policy making. I have been really about making sure the House did its job, and I made no bones about it. Period. And I was pretty aggressive about it, and representing the district that I represented in San Francisco, I didn't even have to come home.
Yeah.
And the innovations that we had done in the halls of the legislature gave me, or should have given me, the opportunity to try and explore the governorship. That's the term, that's the election in which Gray Davis won the nomination. Gray was one of my mentees on the legislative side for the years he served in that capacity. He was in a race for the governorship with several folks, Jane Harmon, or the guy who owned Northwest Airlines.
Oh, Al Checky, yeah.
Yeah. So it was a time period when my prominence was at its peak as just being elected the mayor of San Francisco in '96 against an incumbent mayor, and with incredible amount of national presence without having to have DeSantis like my friend Newsom has, or any of those kind of people to swing at. I was doing the kind of thing that the national organizations, and in particular, the press really loved. I was with regularity doing national every Sunday or so. You'd see me, and lo and behold, I would not have been a mystery person. And the Central Valley operators, the farmers, found me to be very receptive of their needs and attention to them. So I would have started with a level of credibility, and particularly among all those people in the halls of the legislature that had reelected me for twice as long as anybody who ever served as Speaker, 14 and a half years. A combination of all those things. But I was so literally dedicated to never using one office for another that I did not run for governor.
And now you read it, and that's fascinating because it's a lesson to all of our listeners, which is take your shot. Try to live life with no regrets. It's very hard, but everybody regrets something, and you heard it here.
All right.
Well, no, we got a few more. So we're now getting into the I think some of the more interesting ones, and I'll try to do them rapid fire. There's been a parade of speakers since you left, and all kidding aside, and I'll give you my opinion too. Who has been the best since you left?
Well, there have been 3 or 4 that were really good. Antonio had the benefit of being present with me when I was serving as speaker. So he had a little bit of an advantage in what he learned. He was with the old school, but he was present when the prospective new school began to arrive. There was Fabian Nunez, who was really good. And then there was John Perez, probably in terms of the limited period of time that he served as speaker, he probably replicated more of my kind of management of the House. So there were, and then of course, and Karen Bass did an excellent job being the second woman elected speaker in the history of California. But Karen is just Karen. She's not flamboyant. She's not, nightlife doesn't mean the same thing to her that it meant to me and some of the other people who served. But the collection of people who served as speakers, I think, reflected the quality of the House. Yeah. And I must tell you that Bob Hertzberg, that was just, and you're correct, though, none of them had the opportunity to stick around for more than, I think, 2.5 years.
Right,
at the most.
Right. And for what it's worth, I served with 3 speakers in my 7 years, I felt like John Perez was the best. I told the listeners, I told you I'd give my opinion, and that's it. He was just, he just inherently knew how to manage things. All right, so here's a hard question. Here's one that if folks were running for office, they wouldn't want to answer, but hopefully we'll get an answer. What platform of the Democratic Party today do you disagree with? Is there anything that you think you disagree with in the current Democratic Party platform?
I really wish the Democratic Party actually had a platform. I don't think they really have a platform because I don't think that the Democratic Party is operational on a cooperative basis among Democrats. The booing of Newsom at the state convention a couple of weeks ago was reflective of the booing of Dianne Feinstein several years back by the same collection of people. When Jess Unruh was the Speaker of the House many years ago, long before you were born, he insisted that individual members of the Democratic caucus go to the state conventions. He insists that they appoint people who wanted to serve religiously as Democrats, making sure the party worked. He worked very close with making sure that no outside operation dominated the Democratic Party. That has all changed.
Yes.
Now you have these so-called progressives who are doing whatever they're doing. And by day, they were the liberals, and I was one of them. But we were not doing what they do today. We really had in mind, for an example, when I introduced the bill to wipe out criminalization of sexual acts between consented adults, first time in the history of the country anybody had ever done that. And that was 1969.
Right.
We went on from there when John Burton convinced the good governor, Ronald Reagan, to sign the bill that said there would be an annual increase in benefits for welfare recipients. Or those are the kind of things that the Democratic Party, in both cases, had as a goal, and it was not separated by liberals versus conservatives or moderates. None of that. We really were about moving a program to change and affect the lives of people. And the same goes when, in fact, the rampant law, housing bill, picked up where the Hawkins housing bill had started. We were that way when under the Civil Rights Act came along. We were that way when we fought with Reagan over the University of California's operation. So there was literally things that were done in that way. We had organized labor looking out for the working people, not taking over the Democratic Party's operation, because that covered more than working people. And it worked very well. So I'm not sure that the Democratic Party now has those kind of tenets within it, and therefore it would be hard for me to say that their agenda and their platform and their program works as it did
like it
when
used
I
to.
was there.
Right. We need to take another break, but we'll be right back. So shifting gears a bit, I mean, you obviously, I focused a lot of my questions on your speakership. You were obviously the mayor of San Francisco during some very, very, very good years. There is a lot of discussion about this right now in the media, both the media and the social media. And that is a simple question, which is San Francisco a city in decline? And I know you love the city. I know you love it. You are a San Francisco patriot, more so than anybody. But it's been hard for those of us who love the city to see how it's gone in the last few years. And I'm curious what you think. Do you think San Francisco is a city in decline?
No, I do not think it's a city in decline. I do not think it, however, is functioning and operational as it was 5 years ago, 7 or 8 years ago, because I didn't think society generally is in that vein. I do think that the commercial world in San Francisco began to be enticed by the commercial world, and that commercial world is finicky. That commercial world looks only for its interest in its benefits. It does not look for the interest in the city. At one time, every corporation that had headquarters in San Francisco really was dedicated to the arts, to education, to recreation, to parks and the activities associated therein. Just think, the 49ers moved down to Santa Clara, but carried the San Francisco name with it and built a terrible stadium, unlike the stadium in Southern California, which is equal to the stadium that's been built in Vegas, equal to the stadium that's been built in Arizona, and equal to the stadium that's been built in Dallas, in Atlanta. San Francisco, unfortunately, had ownership of a team that wanted something different, and therefore moved out of San Francisco.
Yeah.
Many of the banks that were headquartered here are gone, and they sold off to the Carolinas. Bank of America, headquartered originally in San Francisco, is not here at all. There's only one bank still semi-headquartered here, and that's Wells Fargo. All the others are gone. The companies like Chevron moved over to the East Bay, and it's clear that the growth in the world of technology, while many people think San Francisco, no, it's Silicon Valley. And therefore, when they alter their conduct, they don't do it with the city in mind. They do it with the benefits flowing to them. And with all this business of remote working, there was no such thing as that. San Francisco, like many other cities, are plagued with that. People, however, find it really beneficial to live outside of San Francisco, but allegedly work in San Francisco when they're really working from their homes. That
Sure.
adversely affects local businesses, small businesses. That adversely affects neighborhoods and communities. So we're not in decline. It's just a whole lot of people have created a ton of vacancies for us. But that means new opportunities and new concepts. And that will be what is reflected in a town that started as a place where you sold your gold that you got in the hills.
Yeah. Okay, so there's only a few more questions, and I thank you very much for your patience. Here's another hard one, but asked by a listener, and that is, what special interest group in California do you think is just full of it? Which special interest group in California repeatedly, and this can be one on our side, it can be one on the other side. You can name two. Again, in keeping in mind what we said at the outset, be authentic, be real, say something, that maybe people haven't heard before. What special interest group in California is just absolutely full of it?
Well, when you say full of it, you mean what special interest group in California would like to commit them to itself, and of all the rest of us follow their leadership?
Yeah, or which one is just, full of nonsense or,
Most of them, but they conceal it, and they conceal it successfully. Because, after all, you've got to know that if you are, you are the people running Uber and Lyft, those are totally new industries, you're going to have a lot of trouble because all of a sudden the nature of your business says you don't want any employees. You want contractors. And if there are contractors, that means that they're not members of any union. And if they're not members of any union, that means the Teamsters are in trouble because suddenly people are using the roadways and not paying dues. And so the world has so dramatically changed that it would be almost unfair to equate a person on the Teamsters side, for an example, as being so full of it. No, they are literally burdened with the reason Teamsters came into being. And the same goes for many others. Just probably one of the most powerful organizations in the state of California on the private sector side are the teachers. And they are incredible. California Teachers Association is somebody that I would want to start out with if I'm running for public office, and particularly if I'm running for public office statewide, because they stepped up to be incredibly helpful and creative in helping reform public education. But you got to understand that they're still teachers, and they still need to represent what obviously have not been quality public decisions before they begin their input. And so you cannot, in my opinion, in a critical way, conclude that there is any particular special interest organization that's full of it.
Full of it. I understand. Okay. So you're turning 90 next year. Congratulations. One of the things that has changed in politics is, if I remember correctly, there used to be a lot of coverage in the media about people you dated. It was a constant subject of interest for people. It was almost like the gossip pages. And there's been some very high profile stuff, including material you've written about certain people that you dated briefly. I'm curious, is there anybody in your long life that the public does not know about? Anybody that you want to tell us about today? Could be somebody who's passed away, could be somebody who you just, both of you don't care anymore. But is there somebody that you dated that nobody knows about? Forget about the stuff that people do know about. Is there anybody that, you had a relationship with that was particularly special that nobody knows about?
I made sure in every aspect of my life there was nothing ever really private. I chose to be a public official, and therefore I gave away the business of privacy. I don't know any person that I ever had a relationship with that the world doesn't know about.
Well, you're a gentleman still. I mean, I know that was a tough question. I know that was a tough one, and but I
really can't think. I can't think of anybody that the public doesn't know about.
Yeah. So there's only a few more questions, and thank you again for your time. This is one that also came from a viewer, and that is, has the legislature ceded too much power to the executive branch, particularly the agencies? Legislature will do bills that give away power to ARB or the PUC or, a special branch to do fast food wages. Every single one of those, in my opinion, gives a little bit of power to the executive branch, which gets to appoint all these people, of course. What do you think about that? You've been in politics for a very, very long time.
I have been really disappointed that the combination of term limits and the whole business of reduction in the power of the elected leadership in the halls of the legislature has made it really difficult to avoid and keep the erosion of power that evidences itself in appointed officials by the executive branch of government that does, I think, harm to the delivery system. And that all started after term limits robbed us of all of the talent that we had based on long tenure and based upon reputation in association with quality results. A person like Jerry Brown, in some cases Pete Wilson, in their governorships, and then ultimately Schwarzenegger, all made it their goal to run government, period. And when the governor sets out to run government, period, it sets the stage so that somebody who comes along that really can run government, like Newsom, they continuously enhance their particular position in their particular office. It's too bad because I don't think it serves the public well at all to have a constant redefining of the roles of the executive branch versus the legislative branch.
Yeah. Amen. That is something that a lot of government watchers in California and even nationwide have noticed, is the ever-growing executive and the weakening of the legislative. And of course, it is the legislature, the assembly, that is closest to the people, because we are elected every 2 years, and the appointed officials are not elected.
We are the largest group of people by category. 80 seats in the House, of the lower house, 40 seats. That's 120 seats directly elected by the people and in contact with the people on the delivery side. There's no other collection of Californians elected to office with that kind of potential consistency and cooperation in the delivery of services to people.
Yes, that is true. There's more Captain's Table right after this short break. All right, so here are the last two questions, and these are sort of opportunities to give us some wisdom and also to reflect back on your illustrious career. You are turning 90 next year. And so this is a two-part question. What is the happiest moment of your legislative career? And then some advice. A lot of people continue to want the advice of Speaker Brown. What are, two or three things that you have discovered are the most important in politics and in life?
Well, I've got to tell you, the happiest moment for me was when in the halls of the legislature on the first day of December 1980, the colleagues elected me to the speakership, a role I had sought in one way or another and openly and behind closed doors since 1974 with no success. But in 1980, for the first time, the House voted for the Speaker, not the caucus, and it was 28 Republicans and 23 Democrats out of the 80 members of the House that elected me, which gave me the power to do everything I ever wanted to do in the world of politics. That was my happiest moment. My advice to people who are seeking public office: make sure you understand that all of the decisions you make, you must be prepared to make them so that no matter when, where, or how, there's never a regret of your having made the decision you made as you voted to do one thing or another where the opportunity presented itself. If you do that, you will be successful in perpetuity in government.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, this has been our interview with the legend himself, Mayor and Speaker Willie Brown. 89 years old, still sharp as a tack. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I hope our listeners did too. Thanks again, Mr. Speaker.
And thank you.
Have a wonderful day. This has been the Captain's Table podcast. Thank you so much for listening to our special guest today, former Speaker Willie Brown.